podcast sponsored by Twin Lightning Research. I'm Amanda Siqueira. Today, I invited Sara Siqueira and we will discuss another important topic in clinical research. As an example, we will take the women's weight loss trial. Professor Dr. Strong is facing a relatively common issue that occurs in research, the dreaded missing data. Sarah, welcome back. I missed you. What a long time since our last talk here, right? Hi, Amanda. Thanks for having me. It's good to be back. It's awesome, Sarah. And what is missing data after all? Missing data is all data values that are not gathered regarding interesting variables under investigation. For Dr. Strong Women's Weight Loss Trial, it was detected 40% of dropouts. The study was a randomized clinical trial to test during 1 year in 70 postmenopausal women the effect of two diet interventions for weight loss, the standard diet versus Atkins diets. It hypothesized that the Atkins diets could greatly improve weight loss. The study was designed regarding the eligibility criteria, randomization, blinding, primary outcome settled as weight at 12 months, and the baseline weight was adjusted by using an ANCOVA model. And it was considering only 5% of dropouts. Nevertheless, only 60% of the patients completed the study to the end. 20 on standard diet and 22 on Atkins diet. And Amanda, what is the problem of missing data? Well, the trial results were obtained from the data collected, so the missing data can notably impact on the conclusion. Several problems are linked to absent data, such as it can decrease statistical power, it can introduce bias in parameters assessments, it can diminish study population samples representativeness, it can also impact the variance and the treatment effect, and so on. Hence, it can jeopardize the analysis, the validity, and results in misleading conclusions. Surely, Amanda, missing data can be a nightmare, and they can make researchers feel the same old fears. They can get researchers to trade heroes from ghost conclusion. Yes, how Dr. Strong wished the data were there, right? Yes. Before talking about how Dr. Strong can handle the missing data, it is important to address the mechanism of missing data. Exactly, Sarah. And the missing completely at random means that the missing data is not linked to the observed values and to the unobserved values. Thus, there is no relationship to the outcome variable or to the independent variable, which indicates that it's not expected a systematic disparity among the available variables and the missing data. This is not a common missing data mechanism in clinical research. So the analysis from the obtained data provides a conclusion from a random subset of the complete dataset. Now, another mechanism of missing data is the missing at random, which means that the missing data is linked to the observed variables and it is not related to the unobserved values. So, the missing data will be obtained by the observed data at the end. And we also have the missing not at random, which means that the missing data is linked to the observed and to the unobserved values. This mechanism indicates that the missing data is related to the outcome, and the missing values cannot be estimated by the available values. And regarding missing data, how much is too much, Amanda? Well, there isn't any official evidence for a cutoff value, but some authors stated that more than 20% can threaten the study's validity and power. Wow! Certainly, Dr. Strong had a huge problem with 40% dropout in his trial. And Amanda, how to deal with missing data in clinical research? Do you think you can tell?
Heaven from hell? Yes. First, it is important to know that all approaches rely on assumptions that can also affect the treatment effect. However, it is even worse when we do not take into account missing data and how to deal with them in the study protocol. Further, it is crucial to define the proper approach considering the mechanism of each missing data.
Yeah, Amanda, Dr. Strong should have considered this issue from the beginning. Now let's talk about principle of intention to treat. Intention to treat establishes the data to be evaluated in the statistical analysis. It includes the analysis of all randomized participants, even when there are non-compliance or missing observations. It safeguards the sample size and the randomization balances, therefore decreasing type 1 error risk. Nonetheless, it increases type 2 error due to a dilution effect from the non-compliance data added.
Great point, Sarah. Let's take a look about the possible approaches proposed to the Dr. Strong, considering each missing data mechanism.
Complete case analysis. It is a simple method that only considers for the statistical analysis the participants' data from outcomes that were observed. Hence, when a missing observation is identified, it is excluded. The assumptions here are: requires missing completely at random data, which is a rare scenario in clinical research. Besides, the disadvantages here are: the missing values excluded can threaten the randomization, can bias the results, can reduce study power, increasing type 2 error, especially in case of small sample size.
In fact, with this approach, it is possible that dropouts can be related to regaining weight and motivation to follow the diet. Further, this strategy is not a good choice when there is a large number of dropouts, as in Dr. Strong's study.
Last observation carried forward. It adopts the intention to treat principle, and it is one of the single imputation methods which assumes that after the dropout the participant's outcomes did not alter, and thus this approach substitutes the missing data using the last observation of the participant. Therefore, variabilities and disease progression or remission are not taken into account. The disadvantages are that it can bias the results, due to imbalanced loss and mainly when the dropout is closer to the beginning of the trial. Moreover, when the study has a small sample, it is possible to face a reduction in the statistical power. Thus, unless the researcher proves the required assumption, this approach alone is not recommended by regulatory agencies.
Here, for Dr. Strong's study, this approach presumes that the dropouts can be related to participants who preserve the same weight. However, after a dropout, it is possible that the participants can regain weight or continue improving their weight. For Dr. Strong's trial, this assumption cannot be guaranteed since a weight loss trial accounts for regain of weight when the intervention is stopped.
Mean and median imputation. It is a single imputation method where the median or the mean from the observed values are used to substitute the missing values. It assumes that the central tendency of the observed values is proper to foresee the missing values. However, bias can occur when it is not possible to guarantee this assumption. Likewise, with this technique, the data variability can be reduced, reducing standard deviation, especially if there is considerable missing data, and a false statistical precision can be created as well, enhancing type 1 error. Now, the regression substitution. It is a single imputation method where the missing values are substituted for the observed data through a regression analysis. It assumes the missing data at random mechanism, and every missing value will be determined according to their other observed variable behavior. So, it is important to select in the baseline characteristics what can influence the type of missingness.
Well, Amanda, comparing to the mean or median imputation, the regression substitution can slightly increase the standard deviation, However, even so, the missing data is determined throughout the observed value, which underestimate this standard deviation. This strategy allows to decrease bias, requires software, can be used with elaborate formula techniques, but the time for a statistician to achieve a good model can be longer. And Amanda, what do you think about the worst case analysis? So you think you can choose heaven from hell?
Good question, Sarah. Well, worst case analysis is a single imputation where the missing data is replaced by the worst result. It is used for binary data and it permits to decrease type 1 error. If the result obtained from this approach is positive, it can be trusted. Nevertheless, for Dr. Strong's study, this method is not allowed in case of high dropout rates. Let's talk about baseline carried forward now. In this approach, Sarah, the missing values are substituted to baseline levels, so this model turns means closer in both arms, since it inputs the same values, which underestimate the treatment effect due to bias in the null hypothesis. For Dr. Strong's study, the missing value will be replaced with the weight at baseline, for instance.
We also have the multiple imputation approach, which substitutes the missing values to simulated values based on observed values, using multiple regression imputation and creates multiple datasets. From the analysis of the datasets, a more accurate value is determined. In this approach, it is important to select proper variables to use on these models in order to not get statistical inefficiency. Besides, this strategy seems complex but is not considered more difficult because of the use of softwares, and it is a powerful technique that does not violate assumptions. It provides similar standard deviation and standard error if they are derived from the completed sample.
Finally, Sarah, the maximum likelihood-based methods. From the non-observed values, this method estimates the missing parameters for missing data. So, the treatment differences can be closer to the known data. This approach uses a likelihood function and the results are powerful, similar to multiple imputation. Different from multiple imputation, it is not necessary to select the variables, it requires parametric assumptions, and it is limited to linear regression. Also, it is better for large sample size, it is not accurate to missing covariates, and it needs softwares and a great statistician knowledge.
How I wish you were here. We're just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl, year after year.
Sarah, now let's do a quick review. Dr. Strong did not properly think from the beginning about missing data issue, and he had to handle this issue which reinforced the necessity to know the strengths and limitations of each missing data approach and to address how to deal with missing data in the study protocol. So, Dr. Strong's study had a large dropout rate, 40%, which increased the type 2 error if only the observed values were used in the statistical analysis. Choosing a proper technique to handle missing data is crucial. All of them have some disadvantages and advantages, and that's why the best solution is to prevent this issue.
We're just two lost souls.
True, Amanda. In fact, they are even more than just lost data. And since the problem is here, how researchers wish to solve it. Despite complete case analysis being simple, it requires missing completely and random data and may not be accurate in clinical research scenarios. Besides, in order to determine an intention to treat analysis, it is necessary that missing data are random, which implies the importance of identifying the reasons for participants' dropout and their baseline characteristics. When talking about single imputation, it is important to take into account that some approaches are not more accepted alone for some regulatory agencies. The less observation carried forward can underestimate results, as well as baseline forward and worst case scenario. On the other hand, mean and median substitution can overestimate results. As we mentioned, these approaches can be not so reliable in case of high dropout rates.
Great, Sarah. And for the regression substitution, it is important to select the baseline characteristics that can influence the absent value, so it is really important to take into account missing data from the beginning, which was not the case of Dr. Strong's study. Moreover, this strategy requires time and a software.
Wow, it is very challenging to deal with the unknown. It seems we are swimming in a fishbowl year after year.
Indeed, Sarah, but I believe that the principle of maximum likelihood and for a second option, the multiple imputation can be good choices.
So you think you can choose to use maximum likelihood or multiple imputation?
Wow, I believe that maximum likelihood is more attractive because it creates a more realistic result rather than multiple imputation, which can produce different results. So, even imputing more data sets, some variability will remain.
Yeah, and in maximum likelihood there will be no variability. In other words, it creates the same result every time it is run. Also, it can be applied for missing, not at random data.
Furthermore, both require softwares, and in case of maximum likelihood, the proper software is essential and it requires a great statistician.
True, and Dr. Strong is lucky to have Melissa, an expert statistician. However, as we learned, the maximum likelihood needs to meet narrow requirements, and if it is reached, it is considered the best approach. On the other hand, multiple imputation strategy is more flexible and can be the best choice when the maximum likelihood requirements are not met.
Beautiful, Sarah. It was a great podcast today, don't you think?
Sure,
And how I wish to learn more about this topic.
absolutely, Amanda. I look forward to learning more this week.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you all for listening.